Shouting Men Podcast. It's the Shouting Men Podcast. It's the Shouting Men Podcast. It's the Shouting Men Podcast. Reviews, previews, stories old and new. A podcast about the jewels, just for you. Dedicated to the past, present, and future too. It's the Shouting Men Podcast. Go grab a brew. It's the Shouting Men Podcast. It's the Shouting Men Podcast. It's the Shouting Men Podcast. It's the Shouting Men Podcast.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to episode 5 of the Shouting Men Podcast. As always, I'm joined by David. How are you doing, David?
I'm good, mate. How are you?
Yeah, not too bad. Ill last week, so we couldn't record last week, but I'm back to full fighting strength and ready to go. And joining us for the first time, you'll know him as the grumpy old git of Gills. Warren, how are you?
Yeah, good evening, guys. Thanks for inviting me on. Really appreciate it. Give me a chance to speak about my favourite subject.
We've been trying to get you on for a while, so but it's never quite worked out until now. So it's great to have you on as our first guest of the new year. So welcome. We'll start as always with David.
So yes, Warren. Every time we start the podcast, we just do a little quick fire questions just to ease everyone in before we start getting into the nitty gritty. So, burger or pie?
Burger. I can't stand pastry.
Sit or stand?
Stand, definitely.
Train or coach?
Train.
And Bovril, yes or no?
Absolutely not.
Correct answer. Can't stand the thing.
I don't agree.
It's rotten stuff.
Yeah, my dad loves it, and it's my thing. Whenever he gets one, like, I can't stand it.
Yeah. I'd rather eat grit.
So let's get going then. So, Warren, how long have you supported the Gills?
Well, you could say the story starts before I was actually even born. My mum was pregnant with me, and she took me to the Gills. And the story is that while she was pregnant, some other woman pushed her in the crowd on the night she took me, and they ended up having a fight. And so a lot of the reasons why I am what I am, I think, is down to my mother. But I did go when I was between 4 and 7, between 1970 and 1973, I did go quite a fair bit and sat in the old Gordon Road stand with my nan and granddad, who were season ticket holders, and my dad. But I can't really remember anything about that time. The first game I really remember is the 73-74 season, and we played Scunthorpe United. And it was my first game under floodlights, first evening game, and Gillingham won 7-2. And Brian Yeo got 3, Wilkes 1, Richardson 2, Tyburn scored. The attendance was 4,610. And an interesting fact from that night was that Neil Warnock played for Scunthorpe that night.
What position did he play?
I don't know. He's number 11 on the programme. Whether he played left wing or left midfield or whatever, I don't know. But Neil Warnock definitely played that night.
So by the sounds of it, it was only ever going to be Gills then?
Exactly, mate. There was no other team. I've only ever been to Gills as a proper fan. I've been to loads of other games where I've been a neutral, but there's nothing like watching your own team play.
No, completely agree. And has it always been is it Gordon Road where you sit the majority of the time, or do you move about?
I've been everywhere. So I've been from Town End was when I was a kid. Well, Gordon Road when I was very small, and then I moved on to the Town End when I started going without my dad, and then I moved up to the Rainham End. Then I moved round to the side of the Rainham End where the Gordon Road bit is now. Then I moved round to the other side of the Rainham End where the old tea hut used to be up in the corner. And then majority of the last 20 years have been Medway stand.
Took in all the sides then, mate.
Yeah, exactly. And as I say, I did Rainham End when the Rainham End first got built. Right behind your right ear, David, is where I used to sit.
Very good. Yeah, I used to stand in the Rainham End, and then ever since, bar the year they were building the Medway stand, I sat in the Gordon Road, and then ever since I've been Medway stand as well.
Yeah, just going back to 73, 74 season. That was also my first away game that season, and we played Cambridge United away in the FA Cup, and we got beat 3-2. And I always remember it because I think this is where I got my love of going to away games from. There was fighting in the corner. I don't know if you've ever been to Cambridge, where the Cambridge fans stand. But there's a corner which is a bit of dead man's land. And Gillingham and Cambridge fans were fighting throughout the game. It was 3-2. We got back to the coaches after, and all the coaches had been bricked. So it was a long way home with no windows. It was blooming cold, I can remember, because it was November. And after that, I got the bug. Every available away game that I've been able to do, I've done.
Quick question, Warren. Do you remember what division and what position we finished in that season, 73-74?
Yeah, we finished second, I think.
In the fourth division, we did.
And
who won the league that season?
Peterborough.
Yep, he's good. He's good.
So, who would be your favourite player? If you've got one, you may have a few.
I've got loads.
Let's go.
Haven't been going for 50 years. My outright all-time player is Terry Cochrane. Skillful winger. Took players on. Really got the crowd on their feet. It was probably one of the last mavericks of football, to be honest. When you think about mavericks and you think about Stan Bowles, Rod Marsh, those sort of players, Terry Cochrane was all of those, but just not as good as probably what those players were. But Terry Cochrane was just an absolute joy to watch every week. I'd have just paid to watch him play. And I can remember a story. We talk about Terry being a maverick. I can remember being at Burnley on a Tuesday night away, and we're sitting in the social club. We're having a few beers before the game, and Terry's walked in about 7:00, right? And he's gone and spoke to some people at the bar, and he's gone in. He's had 2 drinks, 2 scotches, right? And we're saying, oh, well, he ain't playing tonight. That's our hopes gone and in a cloud of dust. And he walked out about 7:25. Well, we've then followed him out and we walked round to where the away fans were at that point. And we got in the ground and his name's announced as starting, right? Now, Burnley was an ex-club of Terry Cochrane's, and he was absolutely magic that night. He was brilliant. We won 2-1, and it was my mate David Wells who unfortunately passed away a couple of years ago. It was his first ever away win that he see, and we carried him out of the ground shoulder high because he'd had about 17 attempts before that. He'd never seen an away win. So that was Terry Cochrane. That the great Maverick. He could go and have 2 scotches before a game, have a chat, not even listen to the team talk, go out there, produce man of the match performance, better than anything else on the pitch, and we won 2-1.
So for the young, like I say, sorry, mate, for the younger listeners, like who out of the most recent wingers that we've had would he most be like, if there have been any?
There's no one who's been like. I think where football has changed so much over the last 30, 40 years, wingers in them days were proper wingers. They wasn't what I call now wide midfield players.
Proper paint on your shoe, paint on your boots.
Yeah, and probably John Hodge was probably the nearest you'd get to Terry Cochran, even though John Hodge was nowhere near the standard of Terry Cochran. John Hodge was probably as close as we've ever come to having a proper winger like Terry Cochran.
Terry Cochran turned 72 a week today. So yeah. Played 107 games for Gills, scored 17 goals between 83 and 86.
His best one was against Bristol Rovers at home when he scored from the halfway line, chipped the keeper.
Oh, I would have loved to have seen that.
It's if you go on YouTube, it is on there.
Okay, I'll have a look at that after this.
Any more players you want to talk about? More recent ones or any others?
Well, during that time, we had a player called Dave Memmott, who was a fantastic passer of the ball. He had a bit of an edge about him as well. He certainly wasn't shy. I can remember a Boxing Day home game against Derby. We won 3-2 and he got sent off and he took his shirt off and threw it in the referee's face as he was walking off. So Dave Memmott would come close. In recent times, probably Bob Taylor was a big hero of mine. But then when I first started, Damien Richardson, he was fantastic. Alan Wilkes, he was another Maverick type player. And then you move up into the 70s. Terry Nicol was a favourite of mine. He played sort of a right midfield. Gillingham used to play 4-3-3 sort of formation then. Ken Price and Daddy Westwood, strike force. They were fantastic. They really worked well together. You had Kenny Price, the battering ram, and Daddy Westwood, the guy who'd get all the plaudits for the goals that he scored. But he was also probably one of the best one-on-one finishers that I've seen, Danny Westwood. Dave Smith, left winger, absolute lightning quick. And then you go into the main era where you got Hess, Paul Smith, Carlos Arba, players that gave everything for this football club.
So, a particular era that what's your favourite era since you've been going?
Right, so I was looking at eras earlier, right, and I made a couple of notes of bits and pieces. So, 70s, I learned to love the club. It was obviously the first year I remember was promotion winning and being on the pitch at the end of the season when we finally got promoted. But that's when I really learned to love the club. And then Jerry Summers came along as manager. I really enjoyed our football under Jerry Summers. In the 80s, you're probably looking at a Maverick football team under Keith Peacock that set out to entertain, and entertain they did. Scored loads of goals. But they had some real characters within the squad at that point. People like Dave Shearer, Terry Cochran, Tony Cascarino. And we had a few hard men as well. In the 90s, I've put down here, we went from shocking to fantastic. So we nearly got relegated out of the Football League. And then Tony Pulis came along and built some really good teams, really good, strong, hard sides and capable of winning football matches. And he went from being a team of thugs to a team of playing absolute really good football before he left. Anyone who watches the playoff final against Man City, we played some terrific stuff that day.
Would you say that was the best Gills team that you've ever seen? That Pulis team?
Yeah, the Pulis team that got us to Wembley against Man City, that was the best team that we had. I didn't think we was as good a team the following season, but I thought Peter Taylor made a real difference for when we played against Wigan with his tactical nous, which was something that he was probably the only thing he was better than Pulis at, was just tactical nous. He weren't afraid to make 3 subs after 20 minutes if that's what he thought. And I can remember a home game against Wigan, I think he made 2 really early subs before half-time because it wasn't working. Completely changed the formation for the game. We was 2-0 down and we ended up winning the game. So Peter Taylor, but it didn't start well for Peter Taylor. It was only after a game at Blackpool away, and Blackpool didn't give the ball back after we kicked it out for one of their players injured. And Peter Taylor had a go at Nigel Worthington, the Blackpool manager, and they nearly came to blows on the touchline. And it's from that moment on that year that we changed.
Yeah, we had some fantastic games that period. Who would you say is your guilty pleasure player? So,
currently or forever?
Forever. So that person, you probably would never get their name on their shirt, but you always just enjoyed watching them, and they'd probably
Saunders.
not go down as excellent.
Mark Saunders. He could score some really good, vital goals for us. It was hard as now. He was never a shoe-in to start every week because we had some really good players at the time. But if you needed someone to come on and roll their sleeves up and get stuck in and work other players, then Mark Saunders was probably the one. I can remember a game at MK Dons at the hockey stadium at MK, and we had Patrick Aguiman playing up front. We'd signed him from Wimbledon, and he didn't want to come to Gillingham. He wanted to be at Wimbledon. The bloke had electrifying pace, but you could tell from day one that he didn't want to be here. Well, we was 1-0 down at the hockey stadium against MK Dons, and Mark Saunders came on as sub, 20 minutes left. And he literally got hold of Aguiman and said, "Look, mate, you better start playing because otherwise I'm going to kick you after in the changing room. I'm going to kick you in training all week. And then I'm going to kick you a little bit more just as you're getting in the car on the way home." And Aguiman sparked into life, scored 2 glorious goals and completely changed the game. But it was Mark Saunders who changed the game by getting into play.
So in one game, Aguiman scored a quarter of all his goals that season.
Yep.
He only scored 8 that season in 33 appearances.
Yeah, exactly. But Mark Saunders had come on and threatened him on the pitch. And at the end of the game, he literally winked at Hessenthaler as the team was coming off. Plus, Mark Saunders was a really good lad. If you ever got to speak to him, he loved a beer and he loved a fag, right? You speak to him after the game in the social club, and he was absolutely fantastic to talk to. Really decent bloke, proper football man. And I'm surprised. I'm really surprised that he never went on to manage at a higher level than he did. I think Truro City or someone down the West Country he managed. And he did well for a team for a couple of years. But I was really surprised that he didn't go on to bigger and better things because I think Mark Saunders would have made a brilliant manager.
I was going to say, I'll never forget the sound of when he broke his leg. Because right in front of right in front of where you sit. Well,
yeah.
It was... Yeah, I think it was, wasn't it first game of the season or first home game of the season?
Yeah, I think so. I can't really remember. It's probably too soon.
Yeah, no, I just remember the sound and you're just like, oh. This is probably going to be a difficult one for you. The best match that you've seen. Again, it doesn't have to be a win. Can be a.
It wasn't a win.
Oh, there we go. Never seems to be a win. I think all our guests never seem to pick a win.
My favourite ever game of football, and it will last in the memory for many, many reasons, was when we lost 4-3 at Sunderland in the semi-final of the playoffs, which was the first year that the playoffs were ever introduced. And in those days, it used to be third from bottom from sort of the now Championship or League One as it was then. It was third from bottom played fifth place and third played fourth from our division. And I thought the first game at home where we beat Sunderland 3-2 when Kirrien scored a hat-trick was an amazing game of football, but it was nothing to compare to what happened at Roker Park. We scored early on in the 3rd minute through Elwood Pritchard. We then went 2-1 down, so it was level on aggregate. Then they got a penalty and missed it. Then we got a penalty and Dave Shearer missed it, but Cascarino scored from the rebound. And then, so that made it 2-2. And then 3 minutes from time, Bennett, their centre half, who was a bit of a man mountain, they shoved him up front in desperation, and he scored a header 3 minutes from time to make it dead level on aggregate. It was the first year of the playoffs. Nobody knew the rules. Nobody knew what was happening. Nobody had a clue about away goals or what was happening. So the game went into extra time. We scored in the first couple of minutes of extra time. So that meant Sunderland had to score 2. They got 1 back. Every emotion as a football fan you could ever go through that game, I went through. And there was even a 5-minute spell, I think, in the second half when I went down off the terraces because I couldn't watch anymore. Right, I was that nervous, right, and I'd already been through loads of emotions for the game. And as I say, any emotion you ever want to experience at a football match, you went through in this game. But there was other things that went with it. So there was 25,000 at Roker Park in them days in that game. There was a pen in front of one of the stands at Roker Park that was for 2,000 Newcastle United fans who were supporting Gillingham. Right?
What, deliberately sold to them?
Yeah. They had their own pen for 2,000 people, right, in front of one of their stands at Roker Park. And you can never see them on the telly because the cameras are behind the Newcastle fans and it pans onto the pitch, but you can never hear them. But they were fantastic in helping support Gillingham that day. And then after the game, after we realised that we'd gone through and whatever, the police took all the coaches up through Newcastle on the way out to get back on the motorway to come home. And on the way through Newcastle, there were hundreds of people coming out their houses with their black and white scarves, clapping the Gillingham fans, right? And waving their scarves and whatever. It was madness. It was absolute madness. And don't forget, we had to get out of that ground at the end of the game.
And was it a Tuesday night?
No, I can't remember. I think it might have been a Sunday.
I've heard this story before.
Yeah, and as I say, it was just madness.
So talking of games, did you go to the back-to-back thumpings that we did with the 10-0 and the 8-1?
Yeah, I went to both them games. I thought we played better in the 8-1 against Southend. But everyone talks about the 8-1 and the 10-0. I was more pleased with the 1-1 against Wigan on the Tuesday night, which I went to, 1-1 away. That I thought we played really well that night, and we was far better than the 8-1 and the 10-0. The 10-0 was a bit misleading because in them days there was only one sub. And their goalkeeper got injured quite early on in the game and he could hardly move. And we scored 10. But the previous week in the 8-1, when Steve Lovell scored 4 and we was on fire, that to me was one of the better performances.
Wasn't it very Gillsy? Wasn't our first game 0-0, followed by the 8-1, followed by the 10-0, followed by a 0-0?
Yeah. And then we went on, after we'd beaten Chesterfield 10-0, we went on a run where we could hardly score a goal. And Keith Peacock went out and bought a player called Mark Cooper for £102,500 from Tottenham, a striker, because we'd lost Cascarino in the summer to Millwall and we didn't have a big fella up front. We only had sort of Lovell and Shearer. And we bought this Mark Cooper, who was a bit of a lump from Tottenham, and he was pony. He was absolute pony, and we just paid our record fee. In fact, during that time we signed 2 players. We signed Mark Cooper from Tottenham, and then we signed Gavin Peacock, the manager's son, for 40,000 to come and play. So
again, this might be a difficult one for you. So what's been the lowest point of your time supporting the Gills? And it can be a particular season. It can be a particular couple of years.
It was the 87 season.
Whatever.
Quite an easy one. And after we'd beaten Sunderland and gone through the elation of winning at Roker Park, well, we lost the game at Roker Park, but we went through. And we played 2 games against Swindon, which were really evenly matched. 2 excellent games, 1-0 at home. We lost 2-1 away after going 1-0 up and thinking we was up. They got back to 2-1. And then we played a deciding game at Crystal Palace, Selhurst Park. And we lost 2-0 at Swindon, but we had so many injuries. We was out on our feet. We had players playing on one leg. We didn't really turn up that night, and Swindon just dominated the game. And I can remember that's probably the lowest point I've ever been.
Well, that defeat was harder to take than the Man City game.
Yeah, definitely. I hated that more. Man City game, right? Everyone says how bad it was, and I was proud of the players that day. Right? I thought we went and we played a really good game of football. It was one of the best performances by a Gillingham team. No one ever gave us a hope. We'd gone for a day out, basically, before leaving the Medway towns. We'd gone for a day out, half expecting to lose. But on the day, we turned up, and I just had full admiration for the team that day. I don't hold any grudges for Mark Halsey or anyone else, or Pulis for bringing on 25 defenders and taking off any strike force that we had. It was what it was. It was a good day out. Yeah, it was going to lose, but I felt worse after that Swindon game. Because that team...
So I live in Manchester, and I speak to Man City fans all the time about that game, older generation ones, and they all say the same thing, like as well as I do, is like that game was a masterclass in football, however you look at it, and people should look at that game, and that's how football should be played, and not like how is now all prancing around and falling over because the wind's blown you over.
Yeah, I'll tell you now, Kirrien. I don't know if you've seen any FA Cup games this year.
I've avoided it like the plague.
Right. The FA Cup games compared to the Premier League games, and I'm talking about games between 2 Premier League sides, without VAR, they have been brilliant.
Do you know, I saw the highlights for the Arsenal Man United game, and like that looked pretty good, to be fair. like a brilliant game. But yeah, I don't agree with VAR anyway. So
Yeah,
that's
and I
another
think
story.
the other game that impressed me was the Carabao Cup
Carabao Cup.
semi-final, Tottenham Liverpool. That was a really good game of football. No VAR. Players were playing the game how it should be played. Right? They weren't relying on 400 referees to make sure they got every single decision right.
Yeah.
There was no going back. When a goal was scored, team celebrated, fans celebrated. It was absolutely brilliant. So, as far as I'm concerned, football now is too nice. It's all tip-tap-toe. We've got to make sure the players have a breakfast bar. We've got to make sure that the players have their bums wiped. We've got to make sure that they're all well looked after and mollycoddled. And when they go away games and they stay in a hotel the night before, they've got to make sure that they've got a nice feather pillow and whatever. It's rubbish.
This is why I love watching.
It's rubbish.
Oh, sorry.
And the back in the old days, and I say old days. I used to hate my grandparents when they used to say back in the old days, let alone my own parents. And now I'm doing it. But the players at Gillingham Football Club used to be close to the fans, right? We had an old social club over in the corner where the Rainham is. You could go in there after a game. Players would come in, win, lose or draw, and have a beer. They'd talk to supporters. They'd come and have a laugh. We used to play. We had Gills Travel Club, who used to run coaches to away games, and we used to have a game of cricket against the players pre-season as part of a precursor to the upcoming season, and we'd all go for a beer after. And that's all gone. When was the last time anyone stood with a player just to have a chat? Right?
Yeah.
If you have a chat with a player as he's walking up to the ground for a game, right, you get all the media, hello, how are you? I hope you enjoy the game crap. Right? You never actually go and talk to a player properly. Now, I can remember Nicky Southall and Mark Patterson coming to play cricket for us, right? And really enjoying the fact that they was just one of the boys playing cricket with Gillingham fans and enjoying the beer after. But out of the current crop of players, and social media's got a lot to answer for with this, with the current crop of players, how many of them could you see coming to play cricket with the supporters during the summer? Absolutely none. And
it's a shame.
It's disappointing.
Did you have anything, Kirrien, you was going to say?
So this is why I like going to watch non-league football when I'm not watching the Gills, because after the game, win, lose or draw, we'll go for a pint. We'll go have a chat. So like I watch my local team occasionally, West Didsbury and Shorten. They play in Step 9, I think, or Step 7 or something like that. And like all the lads, they're all plumbers, they're all builders, teachers, doctors. And we just go for a pint after a game, win, lose or draw, and have a chat. It's great. And that sort of sounds like what it used to be higher up.
Yeah, it was. And players were never afraid to go in and speak to fans if they'd lost, because they knew they'd come into the social club. They wouldn't have to buy a beer because someone was always there ready to buy a player a beer. I can remember Neil Smith, he used to come in the social club, and we used to be sitting there speaking to his granddad, and we'd have a good chat about the game. And when Neil Smith would come in, his granddad would say, "Fuck me, son, you was shit today." And it was just a great atmosphere. And I can remember when we probably had our worst team ever in the 90s, when we nearly got relegated out of Football League. you had players like Joe Dunn, Richard Carpenter, Mark Dempsey, Alan Walker, would all sit and talk to the supporters all the time. And it made it part and parcel. I mean, I can remember going to every away game for 18 months and not winning a game before we finally won 4-0 at Carlisle on a Tuesday night. But that was a magical moment. After going 18 months without seeing an away win, right? That's how bad things had got. And then we go and win 4-0 at Carlisle. But those players cared. And talking about the Carlisle game, one of my mates, we'd all, after winning for the first time in 18 months, we've all got up on the fences because the fences were still up then. And we've all got up on the fences. And I used to wear rings on every finger at the time, thinking I was Bertie Big Nuts. We was up on the fencing and celebrating the players at the end of the game. And some steward came down and started pulling us off, or it was either a steward or policeman, and pulled us off. Now, 4 of my rings broke, but unfortunately, one of my mates' rings sliced his finger off.
Oh.
And we had to get him to the medical room at Carlisle. And Jason Lillis, who used to play for Gillingham and a local lad, he was at Carlisle on loan, and he looked after me mate for a couple of weeks while he was up there in hospital and undergoing what he needed to go. But it's things like that you just remember, and you remember the players coming up to us while we was waiting for me mate to be treated in their medical room. And they were saying, "Are you guys all right? Do you need a lift home? What can we do for my mate who was in the room at the time?" And it was just camaraderie. The current crop wouldn't care if anything happened to any of the supporters. They wouldn't give 2 hoots.
No.
And that's what we need to get back to.
So talking to Carlisle, and sounds like you've been to a lot of away games. Is a particular ground that's your favourite? Again, doesn't have to be the most shiniest. It can just be one that you just like.
Burnley away is my favourite. Holds great memories. Cochrane in that game that I mentioned earlier. Bob Taylor's 5 goals in a 5-0 win. And Ife Honora nearly decapitating the linesman when he kicked the ball at him in anger after being caught offside. And we'd been on the end of quite a few rough decisions in a 3-0 loss up there that was probably a Tuesday night or a Friday night as well. But Burnley, I've always been made to feel welcome in their social club. We've always had a good drink there. It's a nice ground, and I've seen the ground develop from what it was when I first went there to what it is now. And as I say, it's chalk and cheese. But Burnley's my favourite ground. I have a soft spot for going to Rochdale, and Barrow recently has become quite a favourite of mine. I really enjoy going to Barrow. It's just one of them old-fashioned football grounds that is trying to modernise. But when I went there 2 years ago for the first time, it was rough. Standing on that terracing was rough. Health and safety wasn't invented in Barrow.
I was going to say, so on the away theme, have you done any of the pre-season tours? Any of them stand out? You have been on them?
Barbados was brilliant. In year 2000, I went out to Barbados to see us play the Barbados National 11. I got invited to watch the team train on the pitch before they played at the end of the week, and the pitch was like Medway area Sunday League Division 5 wouldn't have played on it. It was horrendous.
Was this just after the Wigan game, or was it that? Was it the pre-season after that?
It was after the Wigan game. But we had one day I had a good drink with the lads in a sports bar in Barbados. I've been to the training, as I said. And then we played the game the night before we went home. But the story of that goes, for me, is me and my missus, or ex-wife, right, had never been on holiday abroad at the time. And Barclays Bank took over Woolwich, and we had our mortgage with Woolwich, and we got loads of shares. And we managed to sell them right at the top end, and we got a lot of money. And we done up the house with half of it, and then we went to Barbados on this tour. I said, let's go to Barbados, let's go. So we get to the airport, and Gillingham had just signed 3 or 4 players, David Perpetuini being one of them. And they didn't go out with a main party. And we've got on the plane. I've not told her that Gillingham are playing out there in a pre-season friendly. Right. We've got on the plane, and blow me down, David Perpetuini goes and sits next to my ex-wife. Right.
Don't say he's wearing his Gillingham tracksuit.
He's got Gillingham tracksuit on.
Oh no!
And my ex-wife's gone to him. My husband's a Gillingham fan. You a Gillingham fan too? He said, "No, I've just signed. We're playing a pre-season friendly out in Barbados, and we're going out there, join up with the team." Oh, mate, the face was like thunder.
I was going to say the penny then dropped.
Yeah, the penny then dropped. She didn't speak to me for the first 2 days of the holiday, which was quite good because I had a good time then. It was only afterwards it was miserable. But that was one of them. We did a few trips to Calais and the 2K in France. And one of the stories from France was we was in this restaurant, we was having a really good drink, right? Lots of laughs, lots of you know what football fans are like when they get together. You're away from home, you're in a foreign country, you're drinking, you're having a good laugh. You've been drinking on the ferry and the train, and we've got into Calais, and we're sitting in this restaurant, and there's this guy, right, and he's sat on his own at a table, quite an elderly guy, probably in his 60s or 70s, and he's got this fake moustache, and he keeps putting it on, keeps taking it off, keeps putting it on, and then his family arrive, and he's got it on, and he's found difficulty eating with his fake moustache, and he's literally completely disturbed his family by taking his tash off to eat his dinner, right? And mate, we're just taking a mickey, but it was one of the funniest moments ever. Como I went to, I thought Como was a brilliant trip. I thought there was a real connection between players and supporters after that game. Unfortunately, it didn't last, but it was a trip that was well worthwhile, and I think that anyone who went had a good time. I mean, I flew in and out the same day, but those that stayed, I think, had a really good night with the players on the night after the game. So I think that club tours are really important for fans and players to get a chance to get to know each other and to build relationships that are lasting throughout the season. And I think last season, a lot of players got a lot of slack from supporters because of that Como trip.
Yeah. And I think what you're saying about pre-season is good for fans, players, all to connect and everything. You can see that from the video of Como.
Yeah, it was great. It was. I couldn't say anything bad about Como. The Gallinsons were treated like conquering heroes when they stage walked from the front down to the pub where all the Gillingham fans were, and then led the walk to the ground. I was already in the ground. I didn't join into that happy-clappy rubbish, but we was told that you could get a beer in the ground, which we did, which was a lot easier than trying to get a drink at this little pub outside the Como ground. But it was a really good trip, and I think a lot of people got a lot from it. And I just hope that Gillingham Football Club can do the same next year. Even if it's going to Scotland and playing a couple of League Two clubs in Scotland, right?
Yeah.
Just having that couple of days away and maybe having a few bits and pieces between fans and players would go down a treat.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be the extravagance of Barbados or Como. It just has to be just round the corner, a bit away from Kent, and so everyone can have a good time and connect and just be football fans and decent human beings.
Yeah, exactly. And it creates relationships.
Yeah.
Okay, so Warren, I'm going to make you Brad Gallinson. What is the first change you would make if you were owner of Gillingham? And it can be literally could be anything. It can be fix a stand. It can be literally anything that you want.
I know Warren's answer to this.
Go on in.
The first thing he does is sell Jaden Clark.
No. Because I still think Jaden Clark would make a very good centre forward. It reminds me a little bit of Brian Yeo and Alan Shearer, just in the right place at the right time. Not much else of a clue, but always in the right place at the right time.
I think he'd make a great centre forward.
But if I was Brad Gallinson, I don't really like the idea and the set out of the fan zone. But what I would do is build a type of social club that we used to have back in the day, because that where people could come along during the week, go and have a drink. They'd find someone they could talk football with, and Gillingham Football Club in particular. We had darts teams, card teams, football teams, cricket teams that all came out of the social club. And it became one big village. And the one thing that I really disliked Scully about is that he disbanded all that. He got rid of that social club, built a nightclub that was never going to work in the area that Gillingham is. Got rid of the social club, and he got rid of the two branches of supporters that used to run coaches. And although there was friendly rivalry between the two, each had their own community, even though that community then falls together in the old social club. And I think that's the one thing that I would do, is probably build a social club to get a place where players and supporters can relax and have a drink.
I like it. So what makes Gillingham different to other teams in your opinion?
It's a club that I fell in love with. If it wasn't for football, I could have gone down quite a fair few different routes that could have led to my early downfall, if you like. At the time when I first started going, 70s, early 80s, all my mates were doing stuff like sniffing glue, gas and petrol and whatever. And we was in the punk era at the time. And a couple of my mates weren't possibly the right side of the law at the time. If it weren't for the football and the fact that I just enjoyed a drink and I was able to say no because I wanted all my money to go on an away game on the Saturday rather than get high on glue and whatever, and I was able to say no because the football was more important than that high by get using other stuff. And bearing in mind I've got quite an addictive nature, I think that should I have gone down that route, I would have ended up on something a lot worse. So football club is the love of my life. My mum has always told my girlfriends that Gillingham Football Club will come first. And it's just something that has always been a constant in my life. Plus, it gives me memories of my dad. when I go to football, of me going when me and my dad used to go. So,
and also you make lots of friends through football, like people you don't know, especially nowadays with social media, podcasts, etc.
I agree.
You make so many more friends now from going to football.
But I think I've made hundreds of friends without the social media side. I mean, I have my ex-wife used to go mad. We used to go out for the day somewhere, and there'd be 2 or 3 people that would say hi, Warren, while we was out. I wouldn't have a clue who they were, right? And she would say, "How do you know him? How do you know him?" And I'd say it's through football, right? Because I used to go to all the away games, and I was always around the social club and whatever. People knew me, and I just think that the amount of friends that I've had and acquaintances and real proper mates that I've made through football has been absolutely fantastic. And I think that one thing I've always told people is that if you're interested in sport, you'll never be short of a mate. And this is where I feel youngsters nowadays who can't go out and play 35-a-side football at the local rec, and you just drop out of the game when it's time for you to get something to eat before you come back and join in. I just find that people just can't communicate anymore. They never have that. We'll never get it back. And I think COVID had a lot to answer for that as well.
Yeah.
So I agree. So we bring it up to the current day. So what do you make of the current state of the club at the moment?
Well, the club off the field, I think, has been quite impressive compared to what it was like under Scally in his later years, where no local business would do any sort of deals with Scally at all. He basically alienated the whole local community. And I can remember when Scally first took over, the first year he took over, I was a postman. And my delivery used to be in the high street. And I used to have to deliver to Anchorage House. And I can remember going into Anchorage House to the county court every day and looking through who was in which court. And Scally's name used to be in there in the small claims court every single week, where he hadn't paid anyone. So I think we've come on leaps and bounds. I think Joe Comper, when he's not dealing with a football side and he's dealing with all the other stuff, is brilliant for this football club. I think he's done a lot to try and get back a relationship between players and supporters. Unfortunately, I think his hands are tied a little bit with this wokeness that this country's gripped by at the moment. But I think that he's trying. The football side of it, we're stuck in the middle a little bit. We've got people on contracts that we had to give them to stay in the Football League. And those players are now older, probably not required, and probably need to be released. But with the contracts that they've got, they're not going to walk away for nothing. And it's quite easy to say, well, let's just release a player. It's not like that. Players have got these binding contracts that give them their money right up to the end of June. End of story. And on some of the money that some of these players are on, the offers from other clubs for what they are ain't going to be anywhere near their weekly wage of what they got now. Unless, of course, they're desperate like we were. Some of the new signings haven't been as good as what we first thought. On paper, they look brilliant. Unfortunately, we play on grass and not paper. So I think some of the players that we signed in the summer haven't lived up to expectation. whether it's because they've come down from up north and they can't settle in the south, or it's a whole new different scenario for them, and they're just adjusting, just like a lot of the foreign players that come to the Premiership. It takes them 9 a year to adjust. So that could be for the likes of Jack Nolan, Rowe, Nevitt. That could be a problem. But I think the worst bit of it is that we've got some players there that just don't care.
Yeah.
And I have never known a Gillingham Football Club like it, where so many players don't care. And it's embarrassing to the owners. It's embarrassing to Mark Bonner, who I can't tell you what conversation I had today, but I actually really feel sorry for Mark Bonner today, losing his job. I think players nowadays have too much power, especially within the dressing room. If a group of players decide they're not going to play with either A, each other, or B, the manager, then who do we sack? The manager cops it. Now, as I say, from what I've heard, Mark Bonner did everything he could to try and sort out the situation, but ultimately, I don't think the players were listening anymore. I don't think it's a great dressing room, despite what you want to hear or what you want to believe. I think there's different factions that are causing quite a few issues, and I think that the sooner we sort those issues out, the sooner we can move on. But any player that shows the lack of professionalism that some of our players have played this year, I can't be done with them. I can remember under Harris, Newport away before the Gallinsons come in, and I thought that was probably as low as we could possibly go in terms of where we were player-wise. But at least those players tried. They just weren't good enough. It just weren't a very good team. This team's a very good team, but doesn't try. And I know which team I'd rather have.
I agree, mate. I agree. So we're on to the last section, the Fab Four.
Yeah.
So you've obviously got a wider, from all our previous guests have all been of the same age, so I've got less to pick from. So I can imagine this has probably been quite difficult. So, well, some of the positions, I'm sure.
Yeah, goalkeeper and midfield was very difficult. Defence and up front was shoo-ins. So
let's start with the goalkeeper.
So eventually, I went for Jack Bonham as my goalkeeper.
Okay.
Because I can't remember him really making a mistake. He was very commanding. His distribution was very good. He was a great shot stopper. And although you could pick an argument for any other goalkeeper that we've had, he would probably be the more all-rounded goalkeeper compared to all the others. It's always been Seamus McDonough, a guy we had on loan for about 6 to 8 games, who I thought was an absolute brilliant goalkeeper. We had him on loan back in the 80s, and I think that for a long, long time, he was always in my best Gills 11, but I think Bonham just overtook him.
Fair enough. Onto your defence, or defender, sorry.
Steve Bruce. He was quality from the moment he first stepped foot on the pitch with a Gill shirt on. He gave everything. And I think people realised that early on. I can remember Mick McCarthy getting sent off in the first minute playing for Barnsley against Gillingham, and he absolutely elbowed Bruce and completely smashed his face up. And I think people realised then that Steve Bruce was playing in midfield then. And I think people realised that he was one hell of a talent. And although we've had a lot of different defenders, I think Steve Bruce just edges it for the best for me.
Fair enough. On to midfield.
I'm going to have to go Cochrane because he's a winger and everyone classes wingers as midfield players. If you'd have given me 5 with a winger, then my midfield player would have been Dave Mehmet. But Cochrane gets in just ahead of Mehmet. And bear in mind that those two are getting in above Hess, Paul Smith, and Kevin Ratcliffe, who I thought was an excellent player. The fact that they're getting in above them sort of players says quite a fair bit to me.
Okay, who's up front?
It's got to be Bob Taylor. I can't think of a better striker we've had with regards to his all-round game, not just his goal scoring. It was just his ability to hold the ball up, his ability to bring other players into play, and his ability to get into areas that always gave him an opportunity to score. And he never mind having a go. He struck from distance, he struck from 5 yards. It didn't matter to him. He would have a go. But Bob's the best all-round striker, but Dave Shearer was a personal favourite of mine. And I can remember Dave Shearer when he first started for the club. We played at Orient. He just signed for the club. He'd come on as sub. He was well overweight. And he fell arse over tit, running for a ball. And he looked completely useless. And my mate said to me, "What have we signed here?" And I said, "Mate, I can guarantee you he will be a good player. Just give him time to get fit." And Dave Shearer and his pomp was absolutely brilliant. I've never known anyone who I can see on a Friday night absolutely hammered, smashed out of his nut, right? Then go out on a Saturday and score a hat-trick. And the perfect hat-trick, left foot, right foot header. But I did with Dave Shearer.
Perfect. Well, thanks for your time, Warren. I was going to say, obviously, you're a regular now on The View from the Medway. Did you just want to let the listeners know where they can see you, where they can find The View from the Medway?
Cheers, appreciate that.
No worries at all. I say Chris has done quite a lot of stuff for us. He's turned into quite a good mate actually. So he's now doing a good job on the channel.
We've actually had a conversation, me and Chris, about it today, and he said about me coming on tonight. And I said, to be honest, I have full admiration for people that want to do their own thing and they want to do something different. And I think there's a niche for everybody, all the podcasts at Gillingham Football Club. I think people should be encouraged. For me, doing stuff like this, and I really appreciate coming on, it's creating a legacy for my grandchildren and my own kids to be able to watch back when I'm long gone and burnt to a crisp. It's great to have that opportunity to create some sort of legacy for those people to look back on. But
let's not also forget the contribution you've had, Warren, to this podcast because of that chat we had at Doncaster away at the beginning of the season about how we should push this podcast and how we should do it. So you've had a big input to this podcast as well.
Yeah, I really like the ideas that you got of going back into the past, whether it be 3 years, 2 years, 1 year, or like me, 50 years, and getting people's opinions and giving supporters a chance to have their say, have their opportunity to discuss their favourite subject to Gillingham Football Club. And I don't think it really matters how old the people you have on are, whether it's a 16-year-old who can only remember the last year, even though most 16-year-olds can't remember what they had to eat that night, without going, it doesn't matter whether you have young people on or old people. Everyone's got their own memories of Gillingham Football Club. And I think what players don't realise, because they get paid to play, what owners don't realise because it's a business, what managers and the backroom staff don't understand is that we give our right arms to be in their position, being employed by the football club. They don't realise how passionate we are and what it means to us, and what it means to not just us as personal individuals, but as a collective, all your mates, your friends, your people that you speak to at away games. Right, I can remember speaking to you, Kirrien, at Crewe last year in the pub.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I can remember starting up on the view from the Medway pod when no one else would give me the opportunity. And Chris giving me that belief to come on and have a go and put over my point of view. So I think that the community's there. I just think that sometimes the players and the backroom staff and managers and whatever don't actually get how we feel on a Saturday, how we feel on a Monday after a result, whether it's a win or a loss or even a draw. They don't have that sense about them to put at themselves in our shows and how much it means.
Sorry, my cat's just bit me, which I think is her saying, feed me. So I think we're going to wrap it up there. Warren, it's been fantastic having you on. It's, as always, it's been great talking to you and listening to your stories. And I'm sure we'll find time again in the future to have you back on to talk some more, because it's been brilliant.
Yeah, and I'm always out. I'm always happy to help you guys out. So if you think that I might know anyone that would do a pretty good podcast that you may not know about, or someone different, someone that actually goes to all the games and whatever, I've got quite a few contacts that male, female, whatever, that might be willing to come onto the pod if you was to ask them and give their
100%.
views.
100%. Yeah. As we say every time, anyone that wants to come on, feel free to contact us directly or contact Kirrien direct, myself direct. We're happy to have anyone that wants to come on and do one of these. We really enjoy it. And it said it's nice to talk about the current times, but it's also nice to sit back and look at the good old days and sometimes the bad old days. But it's just nice to just talk about Gillingham.
Exactly, mate.
So again, thank you for coming on, Warren. As always, subscribe. Our social medias will be in the description. A big thank you to Chris at The View from the Medway for doing the bits and pieces he does for us, including the intro video at the beginning. And a big thank you to the German Gills channel, who have been pushing us to get this going on and on. And also to Gills Legends. Go get all your Gills Legends stuff with them. Check them out on X, their website. Again, there will be in the description. This has been the Shouting Men podcast.